Good day and welcome to Agenda. I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time. For today's starter quote, do not die with the music still in you. And now let's take a look at the front page of the Philippine Star. The Philippine Coast Guard, or PCG, assures the public that it is taking a serious look into the reported incident where a China flag carrier hit a Philippine fishing boat. The allision, o yung pagbangga, in which the stationary Filipino boat was hit by the moving MV Tai Hang, number 8, reportedly happened at daytime last 5th of December in Occidental Mindoro. According to the Filipino fishermen, they were left to drift aimlessly on the water while a foreign vessel continued its voyage. The health department allays fears over mycoplasma pneumonia, or the so-called walking pneumonia, saying that it is curable and infection can be prevented through minimum health protocols. 4 cases of walking pneumonia have been recorded in the country this year, and all 4 have already recovered. The DOH also underscores that mycoplasma is not an unusual, but rather a common pathogen. Speaker Martin Romualdez says all priority measures outlined by President Bongbong Marcos will be approved at the lower house before the holiday break on December 15. This includes the 2024 national budget, which is expected to be released next week. Another defendant in the killing of free journalist Percival Percy Lapid Mabasa has been convicted. Denver Mayores pleaded guilty to being an accessory to the murder, which was slapped with a prison term of 2 to 8 years. Now, prior to this, 3 other suspects were also convicted for being accessories to the crime. SMNI host Celiz and Lorraine Badoy are planning to go to the Supreme Court if the House of Representatives will not release them from detention before Christmas. We have a veteran lawyer to discuss the legal side of this matter, but first, let's watch this video.
SMNI hosts Jeffrey Eric Celiz and Lorraine Badoy plan to bring up their case to the Supreme Court. This is their warning if the lower chamber will not release them from detention before Christmas. SMNI Legal Officer Mark Tolentino said Celiz and Badoy will appeal the contempt order of the House Legislative Franchises Committee with the hopes to go home before the holiday. But if the committee denies their appeal, the 2 will file petitions before the High Court on the ground of grave abuse of discretion. Celiz and Badoy went on hunger strike in protest of their detention. The 2 were cited in contempt as Celiz refused to reveal his source of the alleged 1.8 billion peso travel fund of House Speaker Martin Romualdez. Celiz earlier invoked the Soto law, in which journalists cannot reveal the source of an information obtained in confidence. But lawmakers insist that the law is not applicable in his case. What is the Soto law, and can Celiz and Badoy use this as their defense? Let's discuss this on today's Agenda.
Attorney Rico Domingo is the chairman of the Movement Against Disinformation, or MAD. He is also the 54th and former president of the Philippine Bar Association.
And welcome to the program, Attorney Rico Domingo. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Ed, and good morning to everyone as well.
Yes, sir. Honestly, a lot of people only associate the name Soto with a certain bear. A lot of them don't remember Senator Vicente Yap Soto, Senator of the Republic from 1946, I think, until 1950, and the author of what most of us now call the Press Freedom Law, the Soto Law, or Republic Act number, I think, 53. Is that correct?
53. Amended by 1477.
Yes. Could you give us the basics of the Soto law, because it has been cited, it has been quoted, it's being referenced in the SMNI hearings?
Well, it's essentially what we call in other jurisdictions the shield law. No, it is a newsman's privilege not to divulge or disclose the sources of their informational or confidential information. So that essentially is to shield the certain classes of publishers, editor, columnists, or duly accredited reporter of any newspaper, magazine, periodical of general circulation. They cannot be compelled to disclose the sources of their reports. That's essentially what it is. But that is the general rule. But there is a certain exception to that. the amended original Republic Act number 53, which is the forerunner of Republic Act 1477, says if it is demanded by the interest of the state, then they can be forced to disclose. That was amended by 1477 RA, and it says that the revelation is demanded by the security of the state.
Mhm. Sir,
Yeah.
but may ganang nuancing. Interest of the state in the original versus the security of the state. What I mean, for all practical purposes, what's the difference?
Well, interest of the state is very broad. In fact, that was the historical, background of this. So the legislators decided to make it more confined and limited. No, kaya ginawa nilang security of the state, and that's more definitive in a sense that you would know exactly what is the security of the state within the contemplation of the legislators.
No. The other precondition in the Soto law that has also been cited by at least one congressman that I saw was that the person who would be invoking it or could be invoking it has to be a duly accredited reporter, or I suppose publisher or editor of any newspaper, magazine, or periodical of general circulation. Well, just to read the rest of the law, at least the original law of RA number 53. Cannot be compelled to reveal the source of any news report or information appearing in said publication which was related in confidence to such publisher, editor, or reporter, unless the court or a House of Committee of Congress finds that such revelation is demanded by the interest of the state. So medyo specific siya. In other words, specific dun sa who can invoke and under what conditions can there be exemptions.
Yes, there are specific, and let me just underscore, Ed, no? The amendatory legislation says security of the state. Malaking diferensya yun eh. No? So let's just confine ourselves sa present legislation. No?
So that makes it more limiting, in other words.
Yes.
Yung general interest, but yung security interest ng Estado.
Oh, that's true.
Sir, with that in mind, I'm sorry, just in case some of our viewers are not familiar, yung nangyari dun sa Senate sa SMNI hearing, na-cite in contempt si Jeffrey Celiz tsaka si Lorraine Badoy, among other things for refusal to divulge the source of Jeffrey Celiz when he said na 1.8 billion pesos daw ang travel expense ng Speaker Martin Romualdez. So, in that case, sir, does Celiz have, at least on the surface, does Celiz have the right to invoke the Soto law? Does that apply to him?
Well, assuming it is something that you can invoke, but it is quite unclear whether Celiz is covered by that. Because he's not an editor, he's not a publisher, he's not an accredited reporter, according to the KBP, then of any newspaper, magazine, or periodical or general circulation. So he doesn't fall under any of these categories.
Pero sir, on the other hand, isn't, kasi this is a law from 1946, so it is kind of old. I mean, that's putting it.
Yeah, it is a law. It is a law, Ed. And again, if I may underscore, it is a 1956 amendatory legislation. 1956 yan. Matanda na nga yan. But still a law.
Yes, sir. But I only raised that question because a lot of things have changed since then. Since whether it's the original measure or the amendment that was passed in Congress, you're looking at the law that predates a lot of the platforms that we are seeing now. Now you have not just journalists but social media journalists. Now you have not just media but social media. So there are a lot of new elements in the mix, and I'm wondering how that affects or could affect the implementation and enforcement of the law.
Well, it would affect in the sense that what is universal is that you're going to disseminate information that are true and verifiable. That's universal. Whether we have this law or not, that is something universal. So from the perception of the legislators, the investigators of the House Committee on Legislative Franchises, they believe that the witnesses who were officially summoned to appear and under oath, they took their oath and to tell the truth, nothing but the truth. From their perception, the invitees were not telling the truth at that time.
Sure. The amendment nga does narrow down the preconditions from interest of the state to security of the state. When can we say that something is in the security of the state? Is there any way to determine that without leaving it to Congress entirely to determine whether it does fall under that category? I mean, is it entirely subjective?
It's not entirely subjective, because actually, if you look at it from the standpoint of the overall viewpoint, why they call this hearing, it was about allegedly the 1.8 billion travel funds that had been reported on SMNI. But what we're talking about here is an investigation whether the SMNI, or actually it's not SMNI, it's SURA, no? The other, they call it SURA Moog Media Corporation, operating under the name and style Sunshine Media Corporation, or SMNI. They were actually evaluating whether they should continue with the franchise of SMNI. No, let's call it SMNI, and that is the context of the investigation. It's not so much of what happened, but there was a privileged speech from Congressman Suarez who initiated this, and of course, it could be also within the purview of the overall continuing lambasting of the Congress as a do-for-nothing Congress or something like that, and of course the attack on Congressman Francis Castro on the death threat of the former president allegedly. So this would be in the context of that. Should we continue with the franchise or should we cancel it? That is the context of the investigation. And that is according to Section 2, Article 6 of the Constitution, which is the legislative investigation. No? So they are empowered to do that because they granted the franchise in August 2019, and they had the right to re-examine and review whether they should continue with the franchise. In fact, I think 1 or 2 days ago, they asked the NTC to consider already suspending the franchise.
I understand, sir. But on the other hand, does this fall under the security of the state when they're talking about whether or not Jeffrey Celiz's informant was correct when or had the validation to say that it's a 1.8 billion travel expense along the lines of interest of the state than security of the state?
Well, it was couched, the interest of the state or the security of the state was expounded during the hearings, the two hearings on November 30 and December 6. No? And the security of state would be around the interparliamentary relationship between the Senate and the House. No? Because allegedly, according to Celiz, who's the anchor of that particular interview with, she said that he had already gotten the information, the so-called information, from an underground source.
Yes, sir.
And he refused to divulge the name of the source.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And the security of the state would be, how would you have the interaction between the Senate and the House if somebody's driving a wedge between the two of them? And the overall scenario or environment would be hostile if it is indeed the one that who peddled the wrong information about 1.8 billion would be somebody from the Senate. Mm-hmm. So they are interested in doing that. They are ready to, and I'm not being an apologist for the House Committee, but I was there as a resource person. I knew that their interest would be whether there is a violation among other sections in the franchise, which is Republic Act number 14-1. What is this? Republic Act 11422, which is the franchise granted SMNI. Whether they are truthful to their franchise provisions, particularly Section 4 on the responsibility of the network. So they are inquiring into the truthfulness. And one of them is the Section 4. The dissemination, they are supposed to be not disseminating or deliberately falsely informing or willful misrepresentation to the detriment of public interest or to incite, encourage, assist, or subversive or treasonable acts. that would be the basic thing that the House Committee on Legislative Committee was investigating under Section 1 or Section 2 of the Article 6 of the Constitution.
Well, sir, allow me to broaden a little bit more aside from the legal point of view. I also want to get your perspective here as somebody who's familiar with a lot of issues that have to do with media and journalism as well. To begin with, the SMNI, among other agencies, has been very controversial in the last few years. I think that's an accepted fact. They've done stories that are well, quite controversial, to put it very mildly, especially in the Duterte years. Of course, with the context there that the apparent owner, Pastor Quiboloy, is a very close friend of former President Rodrigo Duterte. However, whatever is happening to SMNI now, according to a lot of people I've talked to in the media sector, could have long-term widespread ramifications on Philippine media. Whether you're talking about what some of us would call mainstream media or social media, you're looking at the franchise that has been granted as early as 4 years ago, and mukhang hinahabol na naman ngayon na posibleng ma-revoke for reasons that, as you have pointed out, that may have to do with truthfulness or accuracy of a report, but at the same time may also be colored by politics.
That's true. But, let's put it in context, no? Being granted the franchise to operate a broadcast institution or establishment is a privilege. It is a privilege granted by the Congress, no? And the privilege is supposed to be, there should be entailed certain responsibility. And the responsibility would be dissemination of true information. And that is within the purview of the power of the Congress to inquire into the truthfulness of what they are disseminating. So if the network or any concerned journalist would be somehow seeing some red flags on this, then that is necessarily justifiable. But you have to put it in the context of what is the reason why there is an investigation. That's why we have the newsmen privilege, which they can invoke if rightfully under that particular Republic Act. But nonetheless, it is not something that we can do on a wholesale basis. It has to be on case-to-case basis. And this is particularly the franchise granted SMNI.
Mm-hmm.
So huwag tayo matakot. Kasi on case-to-case basis, we can question. As I think the SMNI lawyer was saying, they would question the verdict of the House, the ruling of the House in the Supreme Court. That is our right. In fact, I've been representing a lot of stations on that and journalists on that. We are questioning. But now here, within the context of this, whether SMNI, as you mentioned, there is actually a pattern of what they believe would be false information and interviews, using that as a vehicle of disinformation, allegedly, according to the informants, then the Congress would be having the power to inquire into that, not because they wanted to stifle freedom of the press, but actually that is within the power. Otherwise, we'll be saying, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. Trying to address this information being peddled allegedly by the one station, and there's a report along that line. Yes. And the people who were supposed to be disseminating the information could not even credibly explain their sources or what is the basis. For example, the red tagging. Mm-hmm. Alam po naman natin, red tagging na yan, napakarami yan. At marami pong na-red tag dito, marami po kami kasang i-file against the ones who had been cited for contempt. So may pattern talaga. Tinignan ng mga congressmen, ano ba itong mga kaso? In fact, they told us, the Movement Against Disinformation, they asked us, what are these cases? And we gave them all these cases. We have 10 cases against the ones who were cited for contempt. And therefore, they cannot explain that. What is the red tagging all about? As you know, red tagging is what? Blacklisting, maliciously blacklisting people who are in dissent of the administration. Mm-hmm. That's red tagging.
Sir, I love your answer, but I want to go back to your answer in a little bit. I'll just need to take a very, very quick break, but we will be back in. We'll be going back into this discussion in a few minutes. So please,
Sure.
sir, stay online. Thank you, sir.
Okay, bye-bye.
And welcome back to Agenda. Good morning, and still with us is Atty. Rico Domingo, the chairman of the Movement Against MID, Movement Against Disinformation, and also the 54th and the former president of the Philippine Bar Association. Sir, thank you for staying with us this morning.
Welcome. Welcome in.
Sir, ang ganda ng nasabi niyo kanina and also very interesting. So there do appear to be safeguards here as far as Congress's power over franchising is concerned. But on the other hand, sir, but let me also put this in, and this I'd like to discuss with you. On the other hand, kahit kung paluin nilang SMNI ngayon because of what is clearly wrong information, and Celiz himself has acknowledged that it was wrong information pala, mali pala yung sinabi niya, bakit ngayon lang sila hinahabol? Gayong, for the past 6 years, SMNI, among other several other media agencies, have been accused of peddling misinformation. So that also raises the question na are legislators going after media network now, not necessarily because of violations, but because of the political atmosphere. In the end, a franchise vote is a political vote. It's a vote by members of Congress, the most political body of all. So there's also the concern na kung hindi na flavor of the month ang SMNI, unlike the last 6 years when it was supposedly peddling a lot of misinformation, disinformation and all that, pero ngayon nagbago ihip ng hangin, baka ganun din mangyari sa ibang networks. A mistake, whether it was a mistake that was on purpose or simply a bad mistake, tatamaan sila ng revocation of franchise.
Well, ang pwede nating gawing perspective diyan, merong kapangyarihan ng Congress sa investigation nila. Ginrant nila yung franchise, meron silang kapangyarihan to inquire whether the franchise is still being used as it is originally conceived, no?
Yes,
Yung sa 11/4/22. And the perception is that hindi na napapalo ang SMNI ng kanilang franchise na binigay ng Congress. Now, it so happened that the 1.8 billion alleged travel funds coincidentally happened, but actually in 2022 we already filed several cases against SMNI.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Actually,
okay. So in other words, it is not politically, perhaps the timing is there. It might be perceived by the public as a political agenda, but nonetheless, the pernicious effect or the ones that they have been doing all the while since their franchise had been renewed in 2019, nandun eh.
Mhm.
And the journalists will be probably very, at least very welcoming in inquiring exactly what had been done in this particular case. Kung wala naman silang ginagawang peddling of this disinformation, bakit sila matatakot? This is a democratic milieu. Wala naman tayo, walang nag-stop sa kanila to question ang kanilang certification of another. It can be a witch hunt or something like that. It can be really disclosed to the public, and the public will know exactly what the Congress allegedly is doing. But in this particular case, there seemed to be some basis, basis in inquiring into the validity or the continuing validity of the franchise.
But sir, also let me also broaden this discussion a little bit more. Kasi for example, people will also be referencing what happened with ABS-CBN in the discussion over its over a new franchise in 2020. In the end, well, we heard the testimony of the BIR, we heard the testimony of the NTC. Yes, there were violations, but they were not major in the sense that it could or would have affected whether ABS-CBN could be given a franchise, and that's pretty clear in the hearings. But in the end, it came down to a vote by Congress, which of course is also its right. And there's no other way around it. It's the right of Congress to grant the franchise for broadcasting. It came down to a vote, which of course is a political vote. Well, I don't know if that's a right way of characterizing it. Supposedly, it's theoretically not supposed to be a political vote. But in the end, call it what you want. In the end, people will vote depending on what they think. Let me leave it there. I will not continue.
Yeah, exactly. It's a political vote, and the Congress is a political body, which are voted by some representatives, voted by the people in their respective territories or districts. But again, at the end of the day, you'll find out. You can go to the Supreme Court for recourse. That's what the political, the democratic milieu is. If you do not agree, as what the attorney of SMNI was saying, then go to the Supreme Court and let the Supreme Court, being the last of last recourse in a democratic policy, to decide whether it was indeed in exercise of its franchise or not. So eventually, it will have to follow the rule of law. Huwag natin siya shortcutin. No, huwag natin siya shortcutin. Ang mahirap sa atin, shortcut natin eh. No. Ngayon, kung didisarmahan natin ang Congress na evaluate and review ang franchise na binigay nila, isang extreme end yun.
Yes, sir.
Another extreme end is that they will abuse the right to investigate and cancel the franchise. That is the extreme right. But meron tayong recourse dyan. Sa rule of law, sabi, kung mali ang Congress, under the Constitution, you can question the alleged error of the congressman and elevate it to the Supreme Court for adjudication. That's the process. Otherwise, it will be different. It will be chaos.
Mm-hmm. Sir, let me just read yung provision doon sa grantang franchise ng SMNI Republic Act 11422, granting Suarasug Media Corporation, it's SMNI's mother company, 25 years broadcast franchise. Section 15 in particular is the repealability and non-exclusivity clause. It retains with Congress the power to amend, alterate, or repeal the franchise when the public interest so requires, and shall not be interpreted as an exclusive grant of the privileges herein provided. In other words, Section 15 is what gives Congress the power to take back what it gave.
Yes.
So ito hugot ng Kongreso na itong pilihan na hanggang ngayon nandito pa rin.
That's Ed, if you look at all the other franchises existing right now, that is a uniform provision.
Yes, sir. Yeah, nanakaon siya. Pero sir, I also need to ask you this kasi for a long time already, a lot of media organizations and journalists basically have been calling for the removal of the power of Congress to grant legislative franchise, or actually the right of Congress to grant broadcast franchises. The question being, why are we giving politicians the power to regulate who can broadcast or not, given that in a lot of other democracies or modern democracies, that power resides not in politicians, but in technical people. For example, the FCC in the United States. In France, it's the Audiovisual Council, which is not led by politicians. In other words, depoliticizing yung grant ng broadcast franchises. I understand it was first done in 1931. Yeah. Act number 3836 of 1931. In Section 1, no person, firm, company, association shall construct, install, establish, or operate a radio station in the Philippines without having obtained a franchise from the Philippine legislature. So yes, sir, I suppose that's also an important question for a lot of reporters to ask and media organizations to ask. Are we alone here in this sense, or is this something that's done in other democracies, that Congress is the only one that can grant a franchise?
Well, it is a uniform. It's a uniform practice in all democracies. In fact, with due respect to your source, in the States, they have the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, who is the NTC, transforming. These are the people who would be regulating all the franchises, the cable industries and everything. It came from the American system that we inherited as well, that we are modeling our laws for after, no? And in the European countries, they have regulations as well. And the congressmen and the parliament would be granted that power in the constitution to grant franchises, because that's imbued with public interest. Because if anybody can just create and maintain and operate a broadcasting system without any regulation, baka naman kung ano na lang lalabas sa area natin. Lalo na ngayon, social media, lahat ng vloggers, journalists na raw. Okay? So, wala tayong malalaman. Of course, I believe in self-regulation, but are we mature enough to have self-regulation per se?
Mm-hmm. Pero sir, I understand what you're saying. There is no need for regulation, whether it's FCC or NTC or all that. Pero the specific grant of a franchise, is it really by the legislature? Hindi ba by the technocrats of, for example, the FCC and the Audiovisual Council? Is it?
No, it is the franchise. Congress will be the one who is authorized and empowered to grant franchises in all the parliaments, in all the democratic institutions. Then the congressional or legislative body would be the one granted that power.
Mm-hmm.
But hindi tayo nag-iisa. We are amongst several other jurisdictions.
So there's no other way around this. We really have.
There's another way around. Let's authorize the president to do it. Are you willing to do that?
Well, not really.
So that's it. So we have voted people in the Congress to represent us. And presumably they're representing the public interest, the public for this purpose. So they have to voice out their opinion on whether a certain franchise will be granted. That's the rule of law. Mm-hmm. Ngayon, kung bibigyan natin sa isang authoritarian, dictator yan, as what happened during the old martial law, that will endanger our democratic milieu. So that's exactly what we're facing. It's a double-edged sword. But again, you have to put it in context. Ano ba itong investigation ngayon na ginagawa ng Kongreso? Tingnan natin mabuti. Huwag nating pangunahan kung anong ginagawa nila. No? Huwag natin lagyan kaagad ng political, although there's a political underpinning on this. But nonetheless, you have to look at it objectively and find out yung bang pagkaka-great threat sa SMNI through the SMNI interview kay Franz Castro, yung ba dapat pahintulutan natin? Hindi. Mm. Ang dating ang vice president natin, sabi NPA and cuddler daw siya. Sabi yung dating nating vice president, sinabi rin nila, pahintulutan ba natin yon? Mm. Mm. May political yan. Anything can be politics.
Yes, sir.
But again, at the end of the day, is it truthful? Is it pursuant to the rule of law? Yun lang ating sinasabi.
Actually, sir, I agree with you, sir. Completely. There have been a lot of well, hindi na apparent, clear violations. But of course, like I also pointed out a while ago, these are violations that go way back several years, and ngayon lang sila tinamaan ng kidlat. And I suppose that's also why certain fears are being raised na baka tatama ka lang ng kidlat pag napagdesisyonan ng mga powers that be na oras mo na.
Kaya nga yan, Ed. Ang kidlat na yan dapat tini-spark natin. Tayong mga taong nangangalaga ng freedom of press and expression. Tayo, huwag tayong matutulog. Kung meron tayong nakitang mali, gawin na natin, sabihin natin kagad, pumunta tayo sa korte, pumunta tayo sa prosecutor, pumunta tayo sa korte. Huwag na tayo maghihintay. Ang hirap sa atin, kung hindi natin nagugustuhan, hindi tayo pumupunta sa korte. Sabihin natin, ganyan talaga ang sistema. We have to address it and hold people accountable. And presumably, the congressmen are to be held accountable for their verdict in this particular case. If they're wrong, then the Supreme Court will say so. Mm-hmm. That is the rule of law process. Ang karamihan sa atin, kung huwag naman tayo magpapaano, I don't want to be criticizing the media, particularly the traditional media. Alam naman natin nangyayari kung yung mga alleged envelope journalism and everything like that. Huwag tayo magkalinisan dito. No? So ang ibig sabihin, kung talagang tayo ay aggrieved and there's really an impingement of the freedom of press and expression, let us express that by way of going to court or going to the prosecution and hold them accountable. Huwag na tayo maghihintay. Kaya lang naman nangyari ito dahil sabi mo nga, yung 1.8 billion na travel, that is parted. But that is really a simmering development because there are precedents that would provoke an investigation, but they did not do that earlier. But this is a good precedence, Ed. This is a good precedence, no? Or precedence. Mm-hmm. Now, pwede natin invoke to. Dito po sinabi nyo ganyan, ganito nga gawin natin. So we go now to the Congressional Legislative Legislative Franchise Committee. Pero panindigan natin yon. That is our right to go to them. And they will entertain that. They cannot refuse that because they have done that.
Sir, their plan to go to the Supreme Court, what do you see of this?
I don't want to second guess the Supreme Court. I don't want to second guess the lawyers who are handling, but that is their right. There is a prerogative. That's part of the rule of law.
Well, let me retweet that question. There are those who were saying, at least supporters ng SMNI, na they were not given due process by the committee. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are that objectively, I was a resource person. I was present during the November 30 and December 6 hearings, the two hearings that precipitated this, that caused this contempt citation. In all due respect, I think the House Committee was in the right. Mm-hmm. Because even Mr. Celiz was granted that permission to divulge that in executive session, and he refused. Mm-hmm. And we believe that the sources of the information would be some very, to say it very understatedly, very unclear. Ang version niya, pwede ko sabihin Ed, kunyari sinabi ko, ikaw Ed, you are a communist, NDP. You ask me, what is your source? I have a source from the NDP kasi during my college years at UP, I was also part of the KMU. Sabihin ko, meron akong source. Sabihin mo sa akin kung sino yun. Sabi mo, para mapaliwanag mo. Sasabihin ko, hindi ako pwede. Kasi sikreto yun Paano yun? Paano ko malalaman yan kung nagsasabi ako ng totoo? Ed, galing ka yata sa UP, right?
Sir, but I'll use your example as a way of putting more context here. I'd like to simply say na if I were a communist, so what?
Precisely. When I accuse you, Ed, if I accuse you, you are a communist, I am giving an active conclusion that you are a communist. And I'm not supposed to tell you, you are a communist, then prove that you are not a communist. When somebody says something, you have to prove it under the course of law. Hindi. Niretag ka na, komunista ka na raw, pati nga yung Judge Malagar na yung sinasabi, komunista raw in the bowels of the earth, whatever, of impyerno. Sabi, imbecile pa, pasusunog daw ang mga bahay ng mga judges kahit masama kasi yung kanilang verdict about the Security Act proscription of the Terrorism Act. Then, pwede ba sabihin yun? Huwag naman. Totoo ba yun? Eh ngayon, hanggang ngayon, red tag, wala pang ebidensyang binibigay. Sinabi nga ng House Committee, ano bang ebidensya mo na sinasabing red tag? Huwag mo kaming turuan, wala kayong monopolya para sabihin ang tao ay komunista o hindi. May proof ba kayo? Yun ang sinabi ng House Committee. Wala namang masabing secret yun, secret. Maaari ba naman yun? Pinapatanga mo napaka-seryosong bagay, wala kang proof.
Yes, sir. Sir, pasingin lang ako, sir. One more question before we go into break na. I'll pull back a bit and ask you a very, very general but I think relevant question. Ayun nga, sa panahon ng social media, sa panahon kung saan lahat ng tao ngayon ay broadcaster, broadcasting on Facebook, sa panahon kung saan lahat ng tao ngayon ay journalist kuno, dahil nakapag-post ng kung ano, nakapag-publish, where does that leave I mean, when we're looking at what's happening now with SMNI and the possibilities with mainstream media and franchises, how do you view these developments in technology and social media vis-a-vis the power over franchises and Congress wielding it?
Well, let's not talk about the power of the Congress right now because you have already characterized it as a very political body, okay? But what we did in the movement against disinformation, we went to the NPC, the National Privacy Commission, because one of our clients, one of our colleagues in the MAD had been red tagged consistently for the past years. We went to the NPC, National Privacy Commission, and asked the NPC to divulge the source of that libelous concerning about being a communist, and he's Cagayan de Oro, the journalist. I think you know him.
Okay,
so we went to the NPC and we have recourse to that, and we want the social media platform to tell us who are. So we have reliefs within the system. It's not only the Congress, but we have other avenues to ventilate this matter, and we're doing that in demand. That's why we are very, very, very confident that under the system is still workable, but again, it needs a little more focused implementation of the law, and the people should know about that. Ang hirap nito, hindi alam ng taong ginagawa natin. Kaya may protection tayo mga journalists, Ed. Huwag kayong matakot. Kung meron kayong problema, pumunta lang kayo sa Movement Against Disinformation.
Yes, sir.
At tutulungan namin kayo.
Yes, sir.
At saka sa Philippine Bar Association.
A wonderful discussion this morning coming from Atty. Rico Domingo, chairman ng Movement Against Disinformation at dating presidente ng IBP. Sir.
Hindi IBP, Philippine Bar Association.
Philippine Bar.
Magkaiba yun, Ed.
Maraming salamat, sir. Very, very good morning to you at a very, very colorful and interesting discussion. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Ed. Thank you very much for invite.
Agenda will return. Keep it here in One News, all sides, all the time.
As the House of Representatives continues its hearing on the SMNI franchise, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa has said that he would rather not comment on the proposal to cancel SMNI's franchise until it reaches the upper chamber. The senator, however, emphasized that the network has significantly contributed to the counterinsurgency efforts of the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, or NTF-LCAC. According to House Legislative Franchises Committee Vice Chairperson Johnny Pimentel, Congress has observed numerous violations in the franchise of SMNI under RA 1422, specifically in Section 10, which involves the change of ownership without informing Congress. Apart from that, there is a serious violation in Section 4 that the franchise holder should not allow the use of their facilities for the airing of indecent language or the spreading of, quote, deliberately false information. Despite all these, according to Pimentel, the House Committee still has to deliberate the vote on their next step. Currently, SMNI hosts Jeffrey Celiz and Lorraine Badoy are detained at the House of Representatives after being cited in contempt. There's also the possibility that the two might spend Christmas in detention if the hearings are not concluded by next week. Let's discuss this further on today's agenda.
Vergel Santos is a trustee of the Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility. A veteran journalist, Santos is also a socio-political commentator and author of several books in journalism and other subjects.
And you're back on agenda. I'm Ed Lingao, and we have with us this morning Vergel Santos of the Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility, or CMFR. Sir, good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Ed.
This morning pala,
Thanks
this morning.
for having me.
Disclosure lang, I'm also with CMFR. I'm a trustee. Full disclosure. But anyway, it's unavoidable. We have to talk about these issues
Yes.
in the CMFR. Sir, but let me start off with this. Clearly, in the media industry, in the profession, malaking diskusyon yung nangyayari sa SMNI. Actually, not just now, but even in the last 6 years, very controversial ang SMNI doon sa media circles because of the way it's been handling things, because of the way it has taken one side very, very specifically, and the way it has used its power of information or misinformation in the last 6 years. Ngayong nakarang mga linggo, bigla siyang tinatamaan ng kidlat ng Kongreso na dati niyang kakampi nung panahon na yun ako po, kakampi pa ng Kongreso. So may ganong konteksto. And some people are seeing good in this, some people are seeing good in it, but also getting worried at the same time because the motives may be different from what we would like to see. Let me ask you with a broad question first. Your perspective on what's happening now with SMNI as far as Congress exercising its power over franchises.
You know, whoever exercises the power to grant franchise will make no difference in the context of the prevailing political culture. I think all this should be taken in the context of the operating political culture, which is one that pays lip service to democracy and the rule of law, or at least self-interested service to all these nice things about freedom and justice and democracy. This is the prevailing, the operating culture, and therefore, whoever grants franchises will come under criticism on many sides. Ganon talaga yan. Although, in the case at hand now, it is clear enough that a case can be held and can be made that they have crossed the line. They have crossed the ethical and probably legal and moral line. So madali namang, sa akin madaling gawin yun eh. Nakikita natin ng 6 na taon that these people, these SMNI people, have been propagating falsehoods, have been red tagging, have been enforcing extrajudicial effort in the name of the past president. I mean, that's easy enough to make as a case. So and now what are they doing? Now they are seeking protection under those very righteous arrangements, that they themselves egregiously, slavishly flouted during the time of the past president. Yun ang problema. Now, look at that, Ed, and look at what's happening in Congress. Pareho lang eh. If you look at Congress now, suddenly, it used to be a 90+% Duterte Congress. Ngayon, bumaliktad na eh. So, yan ang klase ng kultura natin. Yeah.
Pero sir, doon ko tutuhugin, sir. Okay. Clearly violations. Kasi kahit naman si Celiz is acknowledging na mali ang kanyang binitawang figure sa may sources daw siya, pero mali naman ang nabigay sa kanyang number at mali ang nilabas niya. So, aminado naman siya doon, na sabit siya doon. And for that, among other things, yun nga, sabi ko nga, tatamaan siya ng kidlat ng Kongreso. Pero my question din is that for more than 6 years, we've seen the same things, more or less.
Exactly.
Pero hindi tumutunog ang kidlat. Ngayon lamang. So that also then that raises the question as to whether or not these sanctions and this threat over the franchise had to do with actual violations. Well, not actual, kasi actual violation naman siya. Had to do with the violation itself, or whether it had to do with the political atmosphere.
Yeah, it's easy to to justify second guessing in this case because of the nature of the House in which is deciding on the case. Ang ano dito, I think the determinant in this case lies in the comparison between what happened in the last administration and now. Nung nakaraan nawala yung Duterte, nawala yung ABS-CBN, maliwanag din ha. I mean, it was also clear in the case that ABS-CBN did not deserve to lose its franchise because it has not done anything to justify that.
And that was
ngayon meron
that was stated by experts in the congressional hearings, NTC, NBIR, and so on.
NTC, AIR, everybody, At not only that, we should also take into consideration other draconian campaigns, pursued during the last presidency, against news people, and against people that administration did not like. I mean, maliwanag yun dito ngayon, kaya medyo madaling kampihan ang Kongreso ngayon dahil mas maliwanag ang posisyon ng Kongreso when it comes to violations. Kaya ayaw nang pag-usapan yung political culture kasi sasabihin nila, maliwanag naman ito. Yang si Badoy, yang si Celiz, yang si Roque, yang si Bongo, sinasabi, Bongo is now for the poor, for the downtrodden. Yun ang tinapakan nila ng panahon ni Duterte. Sa drug war lang, malaking bagay yun. Pero ngayon, at saka ina-appropriate pa yung traditional means of righteous protest nitong si Bongo at saka si Badoy, itong si Celiz at saka si Badoy. Nag-hunger strike. Yan Yan traditional righteous means of protest Nakita mo talaga na naghahanap sila ng protection under the democratic arrangements. They flouted. They flouted flagrantly in the last administration. Kaya madali madaling.
Pero sir, yun nga yung tanong ko should the media industry find comfort in what is happening to SMNI now for its violations, given the fact that these violations were there long ago na at they were being cheered on by Congress before?
The news media will never find comfort in a culture where democracy is mocked. Whichever way, even if in their favor or against them. the media. Ayaw naman ng media ng pabor eh. Hindi naman tayo naghahanap ng pabor. Pero kaya bigyan tayo ng pabor o hindi, may problema. Dahil nga, hindi ganun dapat ang kalakaran eh. Narinig ko rin sa sinabi sa iyo nung isang interview mo.
Si Atty. Rico Domingo.
Oo, sabi niya, anyway, kung pag binigyan ng desisyon ng Kongreso yan, pwedeng pumunta sa Supreme Court.
Mhm.
Nakita mo ba yung study about Supreme Court decisions during the Duterte administration? Kung ilan, in the first place, yung Supreme Court na yun, sila lahat ang nag-appoint noong, at the time, yung alliance, yung ruling alliance ang nag-appoint ng lahat ng huwes. In fact, at this time, I think 13 ang Duterte appointed judges doon out of 15 So, ako dapat tingnan lahat yun no? Ay, sige nga Ed, can you find comfort when you have this kind of culture operating? Kaya ako na lang ginagawa ko na lang ang trabaho kung paano ko pwedeng gawin pero yung those things kailangan naman yung baligtad ngayon, bumaligtad ang Kongreso, bumaligtad ang bilis-bilis no? At saka tapos ngayon itong sina Celiz, sina Badoy, sina Roque, and other people quoting from the law, quoting from principles.
Mhm.
Parang kung devil quoting from the scriptures Ganun yan nangyayari talaga yan At madaling mangyari sa ating kultura.
But sir, okay, let me broaden it a bit. Then we go into the question of whether or not Congress should retain that right or privilege, if depending on your point of view, of granting broadcast franchises. Diba? That's under a 1931 law passed by the Commonwealth government and still in force right now. So hanggang ngayon, anybody who wants to broadcast has to go to Congress hat in hand and ask for franchise, like what happened with ABS-CBN in 2020. My question is there need to take a second look at that? And how do we look compared to other countries? Kasi I asked the same question of Atty. Rico Domingo. Sabi niya, in other countries, ganun din daw. The parliaments or the legislatures are also the ones that grant franchises to broadcast companies. Ang sabi ko naman sa kanya, parang my recollection in looking at things is that other countries also regulate, but the franchise or the authorization to broadcast are given by technical people, not by politicians.
Oh,
But
it seems to me another false comparison. We are being compared with mature democratic countries. Whoever gives franchise wherever, if you happen to be a mature enough democratic society, you can be more relaxed, in this, on this issue. Kasi alam mo na maayos na i-discuss at i-resolve ito dahil nga mature yung system. At another point is kung titingnan mo, tama yung sabi niya, kanino mo bibigay. Ang problema is ano yung ibibigay mo. No? Ang binibigay mo, hindi you are not giving them extra freedoms. You are not supposed to do that. It is the Constitution that does that. What are you giving them? You are giving them favor in the sense of technical, a certain technical place on the band. Ang pinag-usapan dito, band lang naman ito So dapat technical capability lang ang tinitingnan. If you are capable enough, technically, financially, to run a broadcast organization, a broadcast company on a franchise, yun lang. Pag ang pinag-usapan, walang hiya na yung reporting, walang hiya. Hindi na, libelo na yan and other legalities. Pumunta ka na sa korte. Ang sa akin, yun ang punto ko Kasi ang tingin ko kahit kanino mo bigayan, pagka ang operating culture is a political one, self-interested, walang mangyayari. So, ang kailangan linawin yung technical standards na ikaw nagbibigay ka lang, NTC, nagbibigay ka lang, etong technical standards. Hindi niyo na kayang patakbuhin ang inyong enterprise according to the standards set by the franchise givers. Iyon pwede kang tanggalan. Ano?
Pero ito, as of now, Congress has the exclusive right to grant franchises and the right to revoke them, even after they've been granted. Does that bear taking a second look at? Does that right or privilege?
Yeah, dapat talaga tingnan. Pero ang tingin ko, nako-co-op kasi yan in the time of Duterte. Yung mga power institutions were co-opted So, nako-op ang Congress. Nako-op yung NTC no? Commission na nga ito Nako-op yung NTC. Nako-op yung hindi lang political houses but also institutional ones. Nako-op in the time of Duterte. So, looking at that alone would give you an idea of how franchise giving works in this country. Hindi mo talaga makita, kaya ako gusto ko na lang baguhin na lang yung standards. Kailangan technical lang talaga. Huwag nang ilagay na pagka ikaw nagpropagate ka ng falsehoods, pwede kang tanggalan ng franchise. Hindi, yung pupunta ron punta ka sa Supreme Court. Punta ka sa korte. So,
otherwise it becomes political.
Yes, Ako naman hindi ko sinasabing hindi magiging political. Ang sinasabi ko lang baka less political pag dinalam sa korte.
So, in this country, everything is political nga naman.
Everything is political Yun ang problema. At saka mahirap nila sabihin na suddenly pinuntirya nila yung SMNI. Kailan lang nung sabihin na yung speaker nag-overspend. Yun lang naman
Oo nga sir. Yung tanong ko kanina kasi parang matagal na marami reklamo pero ngayon lang kumulog.
Sa isang banda sa isang banda, ngayon lang tumunog kasi wala na si Duterte. Lahat tumunog ngayon. Tumunog yung SMNI, yung Kongreso, nagtalunan sa kabila. Maraming yung China, may vigorous effort pushback against China kasi Duterte din yun. So lahat ng mga Duterte effort, there seems to me a campaign to undo. So yun ang political yun ang political context ng lahat nitong nangyayari na ito Pagkatapos kailangan tingnan mo rin na ang kasangga ngayon ng ABS-CBN, yung kumpanya, ang patron, si Romualdez, mahirap i-deny yun, na yung media organization niya. Paano ngayon yan? Di venganza at venganza rin ang tingin ng tao. Hindi ko nasabing this is an issue of vengeance. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that it is credible, reasonable enough
in its context
to suspect that it is so. Tayo naman ganun, reasonable, studied credible tayo mga periodista pag tayo nagko-komentaryo Ang ayoko lang yung ibang mga media organizations hindi nilalagay sa perspective itong lahat ng ito. Hindi dito din nakikita ng tao. Nagagalit sila. Parang si Marcos, si Bongbong Marcos din sila. Sumasakay sila sa public mood. Nagbibigay ng concession. Nung araw, kay Duterte ang public mood So, doon sila. Ngayon bumaligtad. So, ang media, ang tingin ko, timid pa rin Timid
Okay. Well, Vergel, I'm afraid we're out of time. I've been we're already over time. It was a wonderful discussion with you. Maraming salamat, Vergel Santos, trustee of the CMFR, the Center for Media Freedom.
Maraming salamat din.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
And that's today's agenda. Keep it here on Cignal TV's channel 8 and 250 for the latest news. I'm Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.